Anyway, this dude comes like ripping up the hill, blue lights, pulls in the yard. I'm standing on the roof, shining the world's brightest high-powered spotlight into the field next door, sweeping back and forth, and it's prime hunting season. Anyway, the game warden's like, get off the roof of the truck. I'm like, oh, shit, yes, sir. So I climb down. He's like, I can take every gun you own and confiscate this vehicle, shining lights in the fields against the law. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're spotlighting deer. I was like, listen, man, I don't know what I would do if I caught me a reindeer because I'm up here trying to test this light out. And the guy's like, first of all, it's not a reindeer. And second of all, you're not a hunter? And I'm like,
you don't have the attention span for hunting.
The guy was like, all right.
So we're back on day 2.
Day 2 it is.
We were going to try and make it look like it was just all one, but I couldn't get my kills in the exact same spot.
That is true. And unfortunately, I talk too much. And so...
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah, we're back. I'm glad to be back. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. You have no idea what's happened in the last however many hours it's been since we recorded last time.
Yeah.
It's been a busy day at HiViz.
It has.
Yeah. All right. Well, where were we?
So... HiViz had started and you had been invited to present at the Chiefs meeting.
The old Harnett County Chiefs. Yes.
Yeah, tell us how that went.
Yeah, so I had just got the demo truck done. I brought my helmet light, which was one that I had used. It was an old Vision X product. I was like, oh yeah, this will be great because these did a mining.
So a helmet light was like what you were going to present to these guys?
Yeah, because I thought like, okay, well, I'll start with something that I know, I'm sure everyone will really love this helmet light because like,
who wouldn't?
Yeah, you want to save lives and, that's
you need a helmet light
to be able to see. So I thought I brought my little display rack in, I brought the goods and gear and I set this thing up and I started off the presentation like, there's like 30 chiefs in the room or maybe it's 15. It was a lot. It was like the biggest meeting I'd ever given.
Yeah.
And so I was like, turn this thing on, blind everyone in the room. And like, this thing is going to revolutionize the way you fight fire.
Bold.
And very bold. It was very inspirational. And then this fire chief in the back of the room was like, you don't know a damn thing about fighting fire because if you turn that thing on in a room full of smoke, it'll be like driving in the fog with the high beams on. And I hadn't even really thought about the fact that when you go, like, if you go to a house that's on fire, it's obviously full of smoke, but I'd never fought a fire. I knew nothing about what that was like. And so...
He called you out in front of all those chiefs?
He did.
Wow.
It was actually really funny because the first lesson I learned of the fire service is that you got to have really thick skin to participate in anything in the fire service. And I felt like such an idiot. I did the rest of the presentation, but I got so thrown off that I was just like, geez. So afterwards, like we go outside to go do the demo, and this chief, his name was Donnie, he came running out and he was like, hey man, sorry, I didn't mean to like be an asshole. I just had like, clearly you know nothing about fighting fire because if you turn that thing on, it's like, it's not going to work. But the good news is, I'm the local deputy chief at the small little fire department, and we need volunteers. So if you want to come down, you can join our fire department. And I can't teach you about lighting, but I can teach you how to be a fireman. And if that's helpful, then maybe, that would be something that, that you can use in your lighting business or whatever. But come on down.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, so it was funny because I thought, I did the demo and it was fine, but that was kind of an interesting lesson, and having someone be willing to teach you that, I thought, I've now used many of the lessons. I did it. I went down and joined the fire department, and I used a lot of those lessons as the business has grown, and now, now I've done the work of a firefighter for 10 years and have a very little bit, but enough experience to know like that, the building's full of smoke. So
tell me how much did you learn in class versus did you learn in the field with Donnie and his team?
There's like in Harnett County, there's, you have your minimum fire training that you have to do in order to be qualified to go help out at the fire station. Okay. And so like the first couple calls, like you basically just sit in the truck and do nothing.
Yeah.
And then, but I mean like, okay, you gotta move this thing, carry this, whatever. Like and Donnie was like, you're hooked to my hip, don't run away. And when this pager beeps, you come up to the fire station and get in the truck and I'll tell you what to do. And I'm like, all right. So, and then like, you do your minimum required training, and then you do like, I think they call them 1403 classes, you use some live burn. So I did a lot of that stuff in the field. And there's so much in the fire service that's practical. And what I really like about the public safety training is that it's not all books. I mean, there's a lot of back end that you have to learn. It's like, my favorite class ever was hazardous materials. I thought that was awesome. And then also this, what's called fire behavior, where it talks about the chemistry and why does fire do what it does. And if you know how fire works, then it's not that you don't have to be scared of it, but if you know enough about something, then you can know like the boundaries in which you can operate safely and where you can't operate safely.
Yeah.
And so what I learned, amongst a lot of other things, one of the things I learned in the fire service training was like kind of those guardrails, but I was never really, it wasn't like if you go take a class at college, like you have to sit down in class. This is taught at fire stations and at night, you do your classes. And then there's like a weekend school that you can do. It's a couple of weekends that you go, and that gets your basic minimum required training done.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned there was we showed up and we were like right on time. I think class started at 9 or whatever. And we drove from Harnett County. That was like an hour away. And we pulled up, and I got there, and as I'm walking inside, the guy slams the door. And he's like, "You're late." And we were late. It's 9 o'clock. And he's like, "Exactly. Class starts at 9 and you're late." He's like, "Early's on time's late, and late is not acceptable." So we had to go outside in the parking lot and call Donnie and be like, "Hey, I know you sent us to this rookie school. I know we're up here. Well, we're here on time, but the fire chief didn't say it was on time." We felt like morons. And they did their whole morning class. The guy come and got us lunch and then put us back in the thing. And we had run and do all the stuff.
And you still use that. We have a stand-up meeting every morning at 9 where the team kind of just gets together and we go over what's going on for the day. And we have a rule that if you're late, you got to do push-ups for the number of minutes that you're late.
There are so many things I learned, whether it was in the academy or in night schools or in the fire service, that I use in business, like that one. And there's a million. Like, you got to have a plan, a backup, and a backup to the backup. I think that's always something we do for trade shows and other things. And there was a lot I learned in the fire service world.
I remember you coming home from a call, one of the first calls when you had no idea what you were doing, and you were like puking everywhere. And I don't remember why.
Yeah. So we had gone to it was a tobacco bulk barn.
Yeah.
And like everyone, in the fire service, like they say heart attack's number 1 killer and cancer is number 2. And the car act, like there's these things that are known for killing firefighters. Yeah. Well, I always thought it was because firemen chewed tobacco in the bays or like smoked cigarettes or whatever. And that was like, I figured that's what it was. But I think most of the industry think, it's because of the actual fires. And I never really knew or differentiated the two. I just thought, okay, well, it's part of the fire service culture years ago. Yeah. Now, maybe not so much. But at least where I was, like all the guys smoked and all the guys chewed tobacco. And it's a farming area. And in eastern rural North Carolina, it was tobacco fields. Yeah. So that, I just assumed that was part of the culture. Anyway, but that call we ran to a bulk barn, which is basically like imagine a short single wide mobile home that's got racks of tobacco leaves inside. And when we ran the call, they shoot propane under it and it dries the leaves out. And so we were in there and we're pulling all these leaves out and we're throwing them in the yard and spraying them with the hose. And I am like hot in my full turnout gear. And they're like, "Well, take that shit off. You don't need to wear all that stuff." So I take it all off, and the guys are like just grabbing bundles of these tobacco leaves and throwing them in the yard. But you absorb that stuff through your arms. But everyone else in the whole fire service smoked or chewed tobacco. So they all had some nicotine tolerance. I had zero. I'd never smoked anything in my whole life ever. Never chewed tobacco leaf. So we went and pulled these things and threw them in the yard. And I felt like such a clown because they were like, "Oh, Bo, you should take your jacket off, man. Now you're all covered in tobacco. You're going to be puking." So I got nicotine sick the first call I went on.
Tobacco poisoning?
Yeah, something like that from the nicotine. It was so funny. But yeah, it was like something I would have never learned in rural North Carolina. You would have never known. And
then you wanted to do your EMT, and you did do your EMT basic certification kind of alongside that?
Yeah, so Donnie recommended, as I was doing the fire school, he said, "Hey, the other thing you need to learn is that the fire trucks and the ambulances, at least where I was starting out, it wasn't the same agency. They ran mutual aid with each other, like on cardiac arrest and stuff. But it was primarily fire did fire, EMS did EMS, and EMS was a county agency, and the fire departments were individual chartered little groups." So he said, "Look, there's lights on both vehicles. And so if you want to learn the ambulance world, you probably need to go get your EMT. And then you can get a part-time job working on the ambulance, and you can actually, experience it." Because in our area, you weren't allowed to do ride-alongs unless you were qualified to do it. And so, anyway, so I did it. I went and did the online school, and it was like 6 weeks, 0 to hero. Terrible idea. I didn't learn a whole lot.
0 to hero.
It was so bad. But I did it. I got the credential, and
that was all at his encouragement. I mean, he really became a mentor of yours through that first.
Yeah,
yes.
We would, because the business wasn't like a full-time thing. It was it was like a little company.
I was working, I don't even know if I lived in the States yet. Maybe I did, but I was working.
Back and forth from Australia, I think.
Yeah.
As that started, Donnie would come over, at the house. So tinkering with flashlights in the garage. He'd come over and BS, or I'd go to the fire station, and I would spend the majority of my day sitting in the bays of the fire station, tinkering with whatever lighting I was playing with, or asking questions, or going through the trucks, or just, you learn so much in the fire service by immersion. It's kind of like a foreign language. If you just go get involved, you don't want to go kick the front door of a house in until you're qualified to do it. But you can learn where the tools are on the truck, how the tools work, why they work, the lingo. Even just knowing what they call, when someone talks about catch a plug, that doesn't make any sense unless you know, that means hook a hose around a fire hydrant, lay a line out. It's so you got to learn the way people speak. And so in order to speak to firefighters, so much of that was just sitting in the bays. And Donnie would be at the fire station. He worked full-time at Pfizer or somewhere. But he was always there on the weekends. And so on Saturday we'd go
I remember I would come up and visit, and the guys would just be hanging out and chatting. And it was a really nice, environment. And
it's like I go up to the fire station. I just like, hey, what's this mean?
Nice.
What's the practical application?
So they were really approachable and
super. Yeah. I mean, more so than I think now that I know the industry better, that was abnormal.
Really?
I mean, the way that they are. And I think that probably in the Northeast, they're like that at some places, but there are some places where the fire service, like the guys are in their little club of friends in the firehouse. And when you're an outsider coming in, it's super intimidating.
You have to earn your place.
The first time I went down to the fire station after Donnie recommended that I come apply, he was like, here's the application, you fill this thing out. So I like buttoned up, suit and tie, go down to the fire station. All these dudes are hanging out the back of the truck, like just shooting the breeze. And I walked up, looked like a clown. And I had my my resume and all my stuff. And I was like, hi, I'm here to join your fire station. And they're like, the hell, where did you come from? And they used to call me a Yankee because I was, DC is like not that far north, but they were like,
you looked pretty different. Like, this blonde, shaggy hair.
they're like, so they called me into the meeting and they're like, all right, we'll vote on your application. I had like my references and I had like, whatever his skill history. And they were like, do you have a heartbeat and will you answer the pager? You will. All right, great. Perfect. So you get bolted to the side of someone who knows what they're doing. You don't step out of line and we'll teach you the rest. And so it was really funny. So they voted me on and, but it was, the fire service can be really intimidating to get into. Yeah. Especially when the first interactions are so, like, very, not gruff, but like very direct. Because you don't have time. Like, if in the, hey, I need you to not step on that. Oh, it's a power line that'll kill you if you step on it. I don't have time to tell you it's a power line. Don't step on it.
You're in emergency situations,
Yeah, so I just learned it's a very different style of people. And I enjoyed that. And I guess your original question was about the EMT school. Yeah. And I did go through that. I did it online. Which I don't recommend, by the way, but another one that, because, I get out of school, I've got this stinking paper, and it's like, all right, you're qualified to go, try and save someone. Yeah, I was like, dude, I don't even know what the hell, like, I remember my very early calls, maybe not first call, but early calls, they were like, hey, grab the, like something off. I had no idea what the medic was like asking for something. I'm like, I don't even know what that tool looks like. Like I'd learned about it in class, but I've never touched one. Yeah. And so there were so many things that were just practical service that you had to learn. And in the fire and EMS space, they have these things called FTOs or field training officers. And the field training officers take certified people that have no qualification to really do the job and work side by side with them to make sure they don't misstep as they're learning the practical side of things. Mm-hmm. And there were all like, there's so many mentors in the fire service, both Donnie and some other folks in the EMS space that I thought were really, really good field training officers and mentors of mine that kind of helped shape my professional fire service career as well as the business career. Yeah. So
I can already feel myself welling up because I need to ask you about responding one of your first EMT calls.
Yes.
It's a hard one.
So the very first medical call I ever ran, earlier in the day, we'd been banged out to a fire, and it was like an alarm at a church. And I told all the guys, I brought Donnie the certificate I got in the mail, and I was like, hey, I got this, my EMT thing today. It's finally showed up. And later in the day, we got banged out to a cardiac arrest. And it was the first time I'd had my credential, like, first medical call as a medically qualified, what extent it was. I hadn't had any training yet, but thing. And it's a cardiac arrest. And so I texted Donnie and I was like, hey, hell yeah, we going? Let's go thump some chest. And he didn't text me back. And I was like, that's weird. But then I called him, he didn't answer. I'm like, whatever, it's over by his house. I'm sure we'll be over there. Mm. So I blasted up the road towards Donnie's place. And when I got there, the very first medical call I ran was a cardiac arrest at Donnie's house, and it was Donnie. Mm. And I remember pulling in, and it was like, and his son and his wife and a couple of firemen that were there, and we all lived close. So it was like everyone pulled up at the same time. We all realized what was going on. And we went into emergency services mode. It's like, how can you actually absolve yourself from that situation? Like it's your friend or a mentor. Yeah. It's all of us. I wasn't the only guy. Like everyone on the fire station was the same, way.
Well, and I guess like that happens. It's a real thing, right? Because you respond to your area, and everybody in that area are the firefighters a lot of times, and you do end up running calls.
Yeah, and cardiac arrests are one of the number one killers of firefighters. Yeah. And so it was a cardiac arrest with Donnie, and we worked and worked and worked and worked. I remember when we started doing CPR, we did pit crew CPR in Harnett County, which was something that they had trained on.
What does it mean?
It's a method of everyone gets a job. You line the firemen up the door to do compressions, and you have someone making calling, you have someone logging, you have someone doing drugs, you have someone everyone's got a job, and then you rotate on a clock. So someone's running a stopwatch. Yeah, and it's like a NASCAR pit crew. Okay. And what was interesting in that situation is the way we trained on it is the best outcome you can get in the field is return of spontaneous circulation, or ROSC. And
is that the heart's beating again? Or?
Yeah, so it means that the heart is creating blood flow or circulation somehow on its own spontaneously. So you're not doing manual compression, so you're not using a Lucas device. You're actually, the heart's handling its own. Mm. So as we worked that code, we got Rosk in the field. And so we were all like devastated when we got there, glad to get Rosk. The ambulance got lost as it was showing up. And it wasn't like, to the lay person, you would think, oh, the ambulance is not there. That means you're not getting medical care. Well, there was a bunch of EMTs on scene doing CPR. It's not like the ambulance had something we didn't already have, but they couldn't find the street.
That's not always the situation.
No, exactly. It's like, it's important. On that call, we got Rosk. We loaded Donnie in the ambulance. He coded again. Got him to the hospital. Got Rosk again. Coded again. It was like over and over and over. And I remember they brought a chopper in because the local hospital at the time didn't have a cath lab for a blocked, basically, artery or blood vessel near the heart. And so you have to go to Raleigh, which was where they could actually solve the problem. We could basically do everything we could in the field to buy a little bit of time. We had to get to a cath lab. And I remember there's all of us, like the whole fire department, because we all knew, it was like it was our buddy.
Yeah.
And we worked, and they took off, and then they landed, and they were like, guys, he's in cardiac arrest again. And we went back inside. And I remember just the gravity of that whole situation unraveling. And like, we did the best care we could do. We got Rosk in the field. They got Rosk in the ER. But eventually, it wasn't sustainable. And Donnie died. And that was a terrible, it was like a terrible situation that I never wanted to be in. Very first medical call ever. Really good friend. Mentor. We didn't know each other that long.
Yeah.
But we'd become very close in a short period of time. And even all of the training and the experience and the things that I was beginning to accumulate. I'm going to launch this business was small, but it's growing. And it's because of the efforts of people like Donnie that were helping. And, that was just an experience that was like very eye-opening to the inner workings of the first responder community. Not just because it was a medical call, but I got to experience both sides of the medical call at one time. And it was, I'm watching a friend of mine slip away.
Yeah.
I'm working as hard as I can to do everything I can to get that back. And there were all these other people that I had such high respect for also working that call.
Yeah.
And we still couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it's like when you think about the gravity of that situation, like it makes you a religious person. I can tell you that much because like there's nothing, it's not in our control.
Yeah.
And it was good to be able to rely back on the training that we got and know we did everything we could.
Yeah.
But then when I thought, afterwards thinking about it and processing through the grief of the situation and just all of the things, at some point it was like, all right, I'm going to stick this through because there's other first responders that need to rely on a company, to do the job well because the people in this space are too important to not serve. Yeah. When I think about the why of what we do, it's because first responders are oftentimes so willing to go the extra mile for their community. For like Donnie owed me nothing, right?
Yeah.
Like he was just a guy that was like, hey, you don't know anything about being a fireman, but I'll teach you how to be a fireman.
Yeah.
And some of the lessons I learned were like, hey, sometimes being a fireman sucks.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to support the family. And sometimes you need to do the right thing by the brothers. And sometimes you need to, address this industry differently than you address automotive or industrial or whatever.
Yeah. There's so much meaning and just impact behind it.
That was, Donnie was a hell of a guy, a great mentor. And I think about him a lot in all of the stuff we do today, both personally and professionally. Every fire call I run, I think about the way I set my boots up.
Yeah.
I always cover the tops. He was always like, don't let your boots stay open because stuff will fall in them. And so when you sit your boots in your locker, I always pull the back of my turnout pants up over them. And it's like a silly thing. But every time I put my boots away, I think about Donnie because I think about, he taught me to put these things in here a certain way because I'm sure someone put a snake in his boot one time or something. Like, I don't know what the story was, but junk gets in your boots, then you can't put your boots on and go to work.
Yeah.
And so there's so many lessons, whether it's personal, professional. He was a family man. He had a son that I'm still friends with and
great
his wife.
family.
And
they were
they're all
such pillars
so
of the
people.
community too.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess that was a terrible story in the history of HiViz, and I wish that wouldn't have transpired the way that it did.
Yeah.
I would way rather be able to tell Donnie the stories of what we're doing today.
I wish I could see it now. Yeah.
But if you have to learn a lesson,
and he was
it.
a teacher, and he continues teaching, and we're grateful for that. All right. So these next few years were we were just hustling.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. So
we didn't know what we were doing.
No, we did a little.
Little.
But no, I think, I think about our business kind of in a couple of phases.
Yeah.
I think about I had towing phase that was we're not making tow truck lights.
Yeah.
And then buying random lights and selling them to folks that were well-made lights for the fire service base, but not knowing how to be a firefighter. And then I kind of think about post-fire service training, after Donnie died, I'm going to see this business through and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So the other businesses I had run had kind of been, maybe not temporary, but they had been
You didn't have a long-term plan, really.
No, it was kind of like just floating around. But then kind of after that call, I made the decision, nope, HiViz is going to stick around and we are going to help first responders save lives. And I don't give a shit what happens. Like there's nothing getting in my way. This business is going to be successful.
Well, I think it's just so nice to be surrounded by good people. And I think that through your early years, you just take that for granted. You know, you're at school with friends every day and you live with your family and you've got family friends. Then you become an adult and you move and you realize how impactful it is to have good people around you, and you get that in the fire service. I love the good people. I want to be around them.
Yeah, I mean, even like the worst of the fire service are still the best of the community. It's like, it's so good. It definitely is that thing.
So we started kind of figuring out our product range. The brow light was the first release, and I also think about the brow light again as people teaching us. Like the idea of integrating the marker lights into the brow light was something that was totally new. And we got that idea from a great friend and dealer of ours, Trey Daughtridge.
Yeah.
And he was like, why don't you integrate them in? And we did that. And it's been incredible.
So good,
and I love when our customers and our dealers like tell us what they want and what they need and when we can integrate it.
Yeah.
But that first product was like totally different than anything else that had been on the market. Customers were used to like boxy shaped fixtures, either one on the center of the cab or two on each kind of end of the cab.
Yeah.
And we came out with this like long bar style fixture. And I remember like
what the hell?
We would walk it again. Dealers would help us out. They would say, hey, come into our booth. Rev RTC down in Florida. We're an awesome one. They would invite us into their booth in Daytona. And we've had so many people support us like that, but we would tote that in there. I remember carrying it over my shoulder, and everyone's like, what in the hell are these kids doing?
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. You know, I remember that booth that I think it was called Fire Rescue East.
Yeah.
They did us a solid. I remember like walking and being like, hey, can we put our lights on these cabs? And they're like, dude, it's up to the customers to spec them. And they had this hospitality booth one night at like on the beach.
Yeah.
And they were like, and like the CEO of E1 was there. Like all these like people that were like, really high esteemed, like, wow, oh my God, I'm like way out of my element. But I pulled up and I remember carrying that light after the show. We showed it off all day, and then we had this little battery powered box, and the hospitality suite was on the beach.
Yeah.
So
we're like, oh, this is a great opportunity.
It was nice. So we carry this light out and set it up like on the beach. I'm like, you guys want to play some, what was it, frisbee, or like just screwing around the beach, drinking beers, whatever it was. And the guys are like, did you guys seriously bring that friggin' thing out here to the beach? We're like, you just have to see it. And we threw the switch, and they were all just like, holy shit, what is that thing?
Yeah.
And so when I would tell them, like, it's bright, they'd be like, I don't believe you. Bring it outside. Let me see it at night. I want to get a real life in-person demo.
Yeah.
And so I knew, like, okay, if we bring this thing to the beach,
then
we'll give everyone this real life demo.
Yeah.
And one of our earliest customers was Marion County, Florida.
Yeah. In
Marion County, the guys, I think Travis and like brothers. I can't remember their name.
So good, yeah.
They were there on the beach, and they were just like, that thing is awesome. I want that on our next truck. And so they started putting them on their rigs. Yeah. And I think that was our first fleet customer that put
that was a big deal.
FireTech products. And it was, real life in-person after dark demos. Yeah. And that dealer just did us a solid. And they were like, sure, like, I get it. You guys can't afford these spaces, obviously, because this stuff is funny looking. And then and now they're probably one of our closest allies in the space.
Yeah.
And I think about others. I mean, there are dealers all over the country that in different regions where we would knock on a door and be like, hey, we'd like to come, show you guys our tech. And they're like, yeah, we'll give you a meeting. But I mean, ultimately, you got to drive end user demand. And if you drive end user demand, then, the manufacturers will spec it. And I remember, in Raleigh, there were some years that we'd set up like our little table and it looked so chintzy. And then they were just like, hey, you can just come into our, just come talk to our people because we see you guys drowning over here. What are you guys doing? And there's been so many good dealers that have not just let us be in their booth, but now, we can afford to buy our own friggin' booth space. Like that's not the big issue. But in the early days, it's like you got to come up with $5,000 to put a trade show booth up. And the whole purpose is to go meet folks that are speccing fire trucks. And some of these dealers, many of them are firefighters. Most of the guys that own and gals that own these dealerships are some level of public safety background. Yeah. Many of the salespeople are. And so they've been there and they've kind of worked.
They have a servant heart.
I was working as a firefighter and working on the ambulance, running the business in the off time. And as we're growing these, we had dealers and customers and companies, and people would let us come out and set up and do these demos. But at the foundation of all of it was the tech was the best. It wasn't like it was okay tech. It was like we weren't taking the Chinese stuff we brought in at one time and trying to schlep it to firefighters.
We had to prove it, but we knew it was good. And I think that they could sense that. Like, we believed in it.
Well, early on, I remember one of the first demos I did was Flat Branch Fire Department in rural North Carolina. And we went outside, and I told the guys, you got to picture back 10 years ago, this is when halogen lights were the default.
Yeah.
And so like now we're talking about the technical differences in color, temperature, like all these things. But back then it was like, what's unique in our product offering? And it was, hey, it doesn't get as hot as a halogen light. I mean, like now it's like, obviously it's an LED light, like, who cares? One of the things that I was always like 100% of my free time, whether it was between calls on the ambulance or it was like at the house, I was always testing our stuff outside. And I used to take fireworks smoke bombs and I would throw them in the yard, like 20 of them.
Yeah.
And then I would turn the lights on and I could look at the beams, like the actual shape of beams.
Yeah.
And I would change optics out. And so as we were developing like the optics for the FireTech Browlight or developing some of these things, I would be changing these things over and over and over again, trying to figure out like, okay, how much beam width is 2 lanes of traffic? Oh, a 60-degree optic on a front of a brow light mounted 10 feet high. And I lived on a 2-lane road that no one ever drove down. So I would just throw smoke on the road and shine the lights and I could see what they would do. And one time I was testing the spotlight to try and prove there was a way to create a very long distance spot. You needed to use this thing called a parabolic reflector. And so I'd come up with this design and I was testing it. I'm shining it off the roof of my truck in the field next to the house. And down the way from the house was this like wildlife access.
Yeah.
And so the game warden was down there doing whatever the game warden does. And I'm like, I was not a hunter when I grew up. I don't have any problem with it. I just have no idea how to do it. And didn't know much about like the game wardening world. Anyway, this dude comes like ripping up the hill, blue lights, pulls in the yard. I'm standing on the roof, shining the world's brightest high-powered spotlight into the field next door, sweeping back and forth. And it's prime hunting season. And this, and I didn't know when hunting season. It's like, okay, it could have been any season, but I was trying to build this light to disprove the myth that lights for that. Anyway, the game warden's like, get off the roof of the truck. I'm like, oh shit, yes sir. So I climb down. He's like, I can take every gun you own and confiscate this vehicle. Shining lights in the field's against the law. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're spotlighting deer. I was like, listen, man, I don't know what I would do if I caught me a reindeer because I'm up here trying to test this light out. And the guy's like, first of all, it's not a reindeer. And second of all, you're not a hunter. And I'm like, dude, I am like a fish out of water. I do not know what the hell I would do if I was hunting. I'm trying to test this light. Here's the thing. And he's just like,
you don't have the attention span for hunting.
The guy was like, all right, I'm going to get the hell out of here. Stop shining the light in the field. Clearly, you're not doing what I thought you were doing.
So, we started kind of figuring out our product range. The brow light was the first release, and customers, they had to get used to the look, but they got used to it and they liked it. The business started making some revenue, and I think 2013 we learned about the IRS. He was an interesting fellow.
Yeah, so as we started selling more of these handheld scene lights and the brow light, the brow light was taking off. People were starting to buy them. They were putting them on the trucks.
Yeah.
I remember one day after a call, I was at the we're at the firehouse or whatever, and I was sitting on the back of the truck BSing with some of the guys in the bays, and one of the guys at the fire station who's now on our advisory board was a like a CPA or an accountant. I don't even know what that was.
He's like, I think you do something with money, right?
Yeah. And I was like, hey, how the hell, do you need to pay anyone taxes? Like, I have no idea who to pay. They haven't sent me an invoice.
Yeah.
He's like, what? I was like, I've been in business a couple of years. I've been setting aside, whatever the 25%, whatever the number was, but no one's ever sent me a bill. Everybody else in the whole world sends me bills except for the friggin' IRS. And he was like, Jesus Christ. So he connected me with the local CPA firm in town. Yeah. And then, anyway, got involved. He was like, listen, he does like real business. At the time, we're like a little toy company. Right. He was like, I'm going to help you out so you don't go to jail. Let me write this nice letter to the IRS, and we'll pay back whatever you owe the guys, and we'll set you up, and we'll get you an accountant. And early on, basically the deal was, you make sure that you get this squared away now, and he wasn't going to charge me then. But in the future, HiViz was going to make sure we took care of him. So as his business has grown, it's been really fun as our business and his business has grown together. That now we.
Here's our dog, Slick. Hi, Slick.
Hey, Slick the dog. What up, girl?
Thank you. She has something to say.
Oh.
This was about the time we met Slick. So
that's actually a very good point.
Great.
Slick the dog.
Like, I come in the picture here.
She sure did. We would be at the fire station, and where was I? I was at the fire station. I was at the ski school down the road one day, and Slick the dog was at the house. Cam was like, "Yeah, come help me wash this dog off." She was covered in oil. Hello, Slick.
She turned up.
She thinks it has a French fry, but I don't. She turned up, and she was covered in oil, so we washed her, which I wasn't thrilled about because I wasn't going to wash the neighbor's dog. That was stupid. And
she said, "I'm not the neighbor's dog."
It wasn't the neighbor's dog. We washed her off, and
here she is.
Here she is. Yeah, she became my friend Slick, and she started running fire calls with me. She's everybody at the fire station.
So I remember Keith became our CPA, and he put us in touch with a local bookkeeping firm, Martha and Donna.
Yes, they're so good.
Again, people who help you out. Yeah. And so we went up and we're like, all right, how do we start this process? And she said, okay, bring me all. We knew we had to keep receipts somehow, so we did have a big box of receipts.
Boxes of receipts.
And we took it up to her, and I was scared of what her bill was going to be because we didn't have any money, we didn't know how this all worked, and so we were going to hand her this box of receipts. And I said, is there anything we can do ourselves to make this cheaper, make your bill cheaper? And she said, yeah, if you organize those receipts, then then that would be really helpful because that's what I'll have to do. And so like we went home and I like cleared out the lounge room and I started putting these receipts, thousands of receipts, and I organized them by date.
That's right.
And then took them back. And so then she helped us with that process and we filed taxes.
And we had like every receipt ever, like for
Yeah.
some reason we had kept them all. And we had also kept really detailed records. And so it wasn't like we were avoiding paying taxes. I just had no idea what to do. It was like, whatever, we'll save the receipts. I'll pay the invoice whenever it shows up.
Yeah.
And they took good care of us both. Yeah. And the cool thing is that like they had the tie to the fire service.
Yeah.
Keith obviously was a fireman with me. And then Martha and Donna were part of like that whole community. They ended up having their office right next door for a while.
Yeah.
So it worked out really good.
And I was still pretty passively involved at this time, just kind of on the fringes. I was working at a veterinary clinic with people who also became dear friends. And not paying much attention, but I would come on trips with you when I could and when you needed assistance. And we went to Innerschutz to Germany.
Oh,
for the very first time. It's a show that only happens every 5 years. And I think that was in 2014 or so. 2015.
Yep.
And I remember we were leaving Germany and you got an email that like you had to pay the credit card bill. And I was like watching you do it and the credit card bill was like $60,000 or something.
Like $100,000. Yeah, I remember this.
Like more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And you just hit like pay on your phone. And I was like, you just paid that credit card bill for $100,000? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, do you know that you have that money? Or like, do you know, have we invoiced the customers? Like, how do you know? Like, and you were like, well, I don't. I just know it was owed. And it was like really at that moment that I was like, well, I have to pay attention and I need to get involved.
Well, yeah, and I remember that whole deal was like, we had invoices that we owed and we had customers that owed us. And I knew the math worked, but I didn't have like, I wasn't detailed enough in my day-to-day to know like, hey, have we invoiced everyone for things? I knew we had the money to cover the bill.
Yeah.
And so we paid the bill, we shipped the lights, and it all worked through. But I remember it was kind of like, it wasn't sloppy, but it was like, I was so focused on, make sure we have enough that there's profit to cover these bills. Just pay the bills.
Yeah.
The bills will get paid.
Yeah.
Someone eventually will pay us. And I remember
that was terrifying.
Like, so Kaoma moved to the States.
Well, I had moved to the States at that point, and I was like, all right, my car is hooked to this horse, and I'm not going to go crashing down with you if that's what's going to occur here. So I'm getting involved. Martha, bless her, taught me so much about bookkeeping, and I started tracking a lot of that stuff and doing a lot of the invoicing and making sure we were getting paid. I had to be the bad guy and like ask people to pay us their bills.
But honestly, in the fire service, what I found was that generally speaking, we like it's not like automotive or like other markets where people just don't want to pay the bills. Like the fire service, when people purchase parts, they're good for it.
Yeah.
So we'd ship parts to people, and you would call and be like, look, I just started working with Sam. 2 years ago, he sent you some parts and never sent you a bill for it. Yeah. Sorry. Here's the bill that he should have sent to you, and do you mind paying it?
There was one customer who, their bill was like $2,600 or something, and it was overdue. And he'd paid, I think, $2,000, but there was still $600 overdue. And I called, and I was like, hey, we still have this like outstanding bill. And he was like, I mean, I sent you $2,000. And I was like, yeah, but I think the bill's $2,600. And I didn't know enough at that time. I was just like, I guess that's good. These days, I'm like, you pay me that penny that you owe me.
That's right. I forgot all about that.
Yeah. So those like first few years were really hard. We were super scrappy and just were like doing whatever we could to sell lights and make revenue. And then 2015 was around the year where it felt like we kind of, I don't know, hit a point where we were like, okay, we've got some momentum. Yeah. How did you get it to that point?
I think that there were a couple of things we did that were around that time frame that really kind of helped to pour gas on the fire. Mm-hmm. And one thing was, we looked at our customer base and said, like, what are the things that we can do to touch more people better and more effectively? Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I couldn't afford to put a sales force in place, like actual people, boots on ground in trucks. But I thought there were some key people in the space that manufactured tech that relied on lighting experts that didn't actually make light heads. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at how we could work with those companies to create, technologies that were better for them. And then I also strengthened the relationship with our supply chain. We actually merged operations with Vision X in 2015. And we began leveraging the larger team as though we were one company. And what that allowed us to do was have way more robust visibility into our supply chain, way more robust systems. I mean, like we were doing QuickBooks. We just learned how to pay taxes. Yeah. And then we're like, shit, we went from like 0 to 10 million in revenue, like bam. And all of a sudden we had to add all that support to handle that much volume of product. I mean, that's a ton of fixtures.
Yeah.
And so as we're talking about like, okay, we needed 10 times the number of employees to handle that much volume. We need 10 times the systems and robustness. So we really, in that partner in our supply chain, we negotiated an awesome deal where we basically acted as the worldwide exclusive arm of Vision X Manufacturing Tech, where we still developed and owned the IP and the tooling.
Yeah.
And then they were the back-end manufacturing partner. But we decided we're not going to go elsewhere. We're going to work with you guys as a natural pairing.
Yeah.
And in exchange, we need you guys to hold our operations
and
put in place the systems and robustness and warehousing. Because I was an expert in firefighting and in some of the engineering, but not in logistics. Logistics is its own whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I think we leveraged each other's strengths there, which was great because it allowed us to be on the road as much as we were on the road, like 250 days a year at trade shows.
Yeah.
Where they would still keep shipping boxes.
Yeah.
Out to customers. But that was actually its own whole thing, was like the shipping of boxes was its own thing. And we used to like write fake names on the boxes. If we ever did ship something out of North Carolina, we would write like packed and shipped by Frank and packed and shipped by John, because we wanted people to think we were bigger than what we were.
That is so true. Yeah, it was interesting because I think, we were competing with such huge companies that it was like we really had to spin the wheels up and really but I mean, the honest truth was there were 45 people in Seattle and there was, our small team in North Carolina. We were the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
But it was really like having the business structure and system in place in written form, like as a contract, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to operate. These are who's going to own what. These are who's going to be responsible for what. That allowed us to kind of grow and then do things like we did with, like, I think about Wilbert and Telelite and some of these companies, even like there's some other fire truck manufacturers in the space that we manufacture parts for.
Yep.
And we were able to cultivate relationships with those companies that were private label OE tooled manufactured products because we had manufacturing behind us and we had customer relationships in front of us. And that was really kind of like our core area. So
what else did you do, or what else did we do during that time to like continue building momentum?
I think there was a lot, you mentioned like 250 days a year on the road. There was a lot of customer interaction.
Yeah.
And so we were in the field. I mean, any opportunity there was to go, I would literally go, like when I would go down to go visit E1, for example, down in Ocala, I would stay in a fire station, like in Marion County. I'd go stay on the station and ride the trucks. And it was kind of a catch-22. Number one, I didn't have the money to go spend at a hotel. And number two, I wanted to experience what it was like to use our products at night after dark. And like our little small town, we didn't have our stuff. They couldn't afford our stuff in the middle of nowhere. And so, not middle of nowhere, middle of somewhere. It was the greatest place in the world, but we still didn't have a huge budget. And so leveraging, like when I would go visit people, I would get in the trucks, get with the crews, go ride, watch how they used our tech, innovate, work. And at some point, like if you push a rock hard enough, eventually you can make it move. You just got to get enough people behind it and get enough momentum going. And so, when you just wear the soles off your work boots, like you can make something happen. And I think there was a lot of that where we just simply outworked other companies in the space, and we're providing great tech for great value.
Yeah.
And our customers appreciated that. And so the business just began to kind of continue to accumulate. But, I think one of the other things that we had to visit every fire truck manufacturer in the nation.
Yeah.
Had to visit every dealer in the nation. I mean, we went all over the place. I think we put 450,000 miles on our demo truck in 2 years.
And then we had other just like random challenges in that time, like where we were living in Lillington didn't have good internet. So we spent so much time dealing with whoever it was at that time.
The phone company,
trying to just get good internet. We had to have 2 internet lines and we were back and forth between the 2. And like as the business had now gained momentum, like things like that like really started to matter.
They did. And I think about, we had servers in Seattle that we relied on that internet connection to access because we had decided that as we're moving forward, we're going to put infrastructure in Seattle, we're going to put warehouse and product there, we're going to put creative and design, sales, marketing, R&D in North Carolina, and we're going to operate this business that way.
Yeah.
But it required infrastructure. And so, it was funny because as you do a transaction a day, you just deal with a slow connection.
Yeah.
But when you're doing 1 million transactions a day or whatever the number of, hundreds of transactions a day, I remember it used to actually be so advantageous to get a night shift that at Station 14 was the vacation station in Harnett County, but it had awesome internet.
It's like an EMT station?
It was in the EMS thing. So I'd go up as soon as station duties were done. It's like, look, if you get all the station duties done, you get the trucks checked and you're in good shape, you can do whatever you want in the evenings.
Yeah.
So I would literally go up there and I would like process orders out, or I would do all of our uploading.
Yeah.
I would update the computers because the internet at home wasn't reliable and I was relying on the internet at the fire station. Yeah. And that isn't scalable.
We would also go and sit outside the library.
Oh, I forgot about that. Whenever we needed to do computer updates. Yeah. Unlimited fast internet.
But we were still in like the old crappy truck at that time. So it'd be so hot. And I'd be trying to process purchase orders in the parking lot of the library.
Yeah. And that drove us to really have to like, okay, look, we
have to move.
We had to move. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was either going to be move a little or move a lot. But it's like when you're packing all your stuff up and moving, you lived it with me. It wasn't like, you have to do something. So we looked at, we were going to move to Cary.
Yeah.
It was going to be good. And in Lillington, honestly, at the time, like if we needed people to do many labor-intensive tasks, there were so many great hard workers. I mean, that's one thing that town's got going for it 1,001 is it's got people that know how to get the job done.
Yeah.
But there weren't like as many creatives or engineers or like some of the artistic or technical skills. There weren't as many folks. I mean, there wasn't that many people there.
Yeah.
So we thought Cary, RTP area would be a good area to go to. But we actually put offers in houses. And it turned out we vacationed up in Asheville all the time. And
I grew up in like a similar area in Australia. It felt like home whenever we would vacation here. So we were just like, what the heck? Let's move to Asheville. We had no employees at that point. It was just you and I. We were ready to separate work from home too, though. And so like all these things were lining up where we didn't have good internet.
I remember that.
We really wanted to separate work from home.
I remember soldering in the kitchen.
Oh my God. Just like, dude, electrical shit everywhere.
It was funny because it was kind of like, when I got fired from soldering in the kitchen, that's when we really became a real business. And then the business was able to grow and prosper.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember because the garage out back was halfway a garage, but it was so hot in the East North Carolina. So the only air conditioning was window shakers. It was like in the kitchen. So
we'd do all like our product photos on the kitchen table. I was just so ready to like not have that in our home anymore.
Yeah. Well, our FDIC booth, when we moved to Asheville, it was the first time we had a building that was tall enough to set our booth up inside.
We used to like borrow people's garages.
At the ski school, April and Chris would lend us the maintenance shop and we'd set this thing up and like outside of the rain because April's rainy. And God, that was, the move was well worthwhile. When we moved to Asheville, it was great.
The timing was interesting because like the business was gaining momentum through that time. And so now we were starting to generate revenue. We were ready to move. We were ready to actually buy a building, or rent a building, which would mean we could then hire employees because like I didn't want to hire somebody to come and work in my living room. And so it all kind of lined up. We moved to Asheville. We rented our first space.
I remember that.
We thought this place was...
it was high time.
We were like, we are some fancy office people now.
It was 800 square feet.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was $800. It was 1,200 square feet. Whatever it was.
Yeah, it was the opposite.
I remember like we went and visited and we were like, let's see if we can negotiate this.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, it's $800. Like, shut up. And it was 2 offices and a warehouse. We could pull the truck in, barely.
Yeah.
And it had an upstairs that was going to be our conference room.
Yeah.
We built it. We put a projector screen. We built it all out.
We were like, this is going to be our conference room. We had nobody to have a conference room meeting with, but we wanted it.
And it was so hot. We bought the place rented the place in February, and then like June came around.
We're like, wow, it's hot in here.
There was no AC, and the building was 20 feet tall, so it was like 8,000 degrees up there. Turned out we never actually used the space ever for one meeting.
No. But that did allow us to have one extra office space because yours and mine was downstairs, and then we had one more upstairs. We called it the marketing tower.
That's right.
And we were ready to make our first hire, and we hired. We wanted a graphic design. I don't know why we decided on a creative, but our business was very much like. We loved social media because of the age that we were at that time. So like we were using Facebook and whatnot like quite a lot. And we noticed that customers were like really jiving with that.
The fire truck market definitely, I mean, even today, like the companies aren't leveraging social media like they're in every other industry ever.
Don't tell them.
I know, it's bad news. But like when we would throw a video up, like it would be an iPhone video, people would just like lose their minds and see us and replicate. And I think that what set us aside was because we focused on what we were really good at, which was engineering, speaking firefighter, speaking engineering, and telling the story. Yeah. Then like Seattle was handling production or inventory. Yeah. I had just gone to Korea when we moved. I just gotten back from Korea, where one of the large manufacturing plants that we actually built our tech in. It's like the ultimate in cleanliness and in high end like it's right next to Samsung. This is for people that haven't been to Korea. It's one of my favorite countries in the world because it is so. Not just modern, but it's like so leading edge in terms of tech.
When their standards are so high.
Yeah, and so they were handling it. They were handling all of the manufacturing. Seattle was handling the other stuff. So for us, the right hire was tell the story better, make sure that our customers have the right tech sheets and all the stuff they need in order to be able to touch our product. Yeah. And so we put out a position for
graphic designer, multimedia specialist or something.
We actually had a position open for graphic designer and for videographer. And the kid that showed up came to the interview and he was like, "Oh, I'm here." And I had completely forgotten. This dude walks up and I'm like, "Oh, hi."
Like nothing on our calendars at that time. We still couldn't keep track of it.
Oh, and he was like, "Oh, so I'm here to interview. And I'm like asking him questions.
Yeah.
Like, or maybe I had an engineering position. So I'm like asking him all these things.
Yeah.
Finally, I was just like, dude, I honestly don't remember what position you're interviewing for. He's like, oh, graphic designer and videographer. And then I was like, got it. When did you graduate? It's like, yesterday. I'm like, great, you're hired.
Yeah.
It turned out to be awesome. It was so good.
Micah, yeah, we were three amigos there for a while.
It was.
Yeah. So we just lent into like videography and marketing and really like lend into our presence online, and that was awesome.
Well, we transitioned in the first true full-time FireTech team member being a videographer. We were able to transition from me shooting stuff on the iPhone to handing that to somebody else to be able to do, which allowed me to focus on how are we going to continue putting fuel in this fire and focus on sales structures and price sheets and new tech and other areas. And so that was really instrumental in our business continuing to expand. The problem was, though, that building only had three spaces to work.
Yeah.
And we thought it was going to be like a 3-year friggin' investment. And we were there 6 months and it was like, shit, we're out of room.
Yeah. So again, like we kind of hit this point where like another change needed to be made. And so we're like, okay, shoot, we can't hire anymore. We also kind of realized during that time that like, oh, having employees is interesting. Difficult.
To this.
Yeah. But you just have to know so much more. And it's like, we only ever had to manage ourselves. And so it was like, we now had a little bit of space to hire one person, but now we were out of space. So one, we needed to find a new facility, and then we needed to continue expanding the team. And all of those things were like just big things that we hadn't done before. So we bought this new facility in 2019, ready to expand the team. And we kicked kind of off that grand opening after we renovated with an open house. So tell me about that.
It was really interesting. So when we moved in, this building's bigger than our old place. Was like 1,200 square feet. This is like 10,000. We have another 10,000 next door. So it was big and empty. All of our stuff didn't fill the whole building up. And so we did this like kind of renovation project to have the place ready. And it was basically just like paint and some wallpaper and a couple things. But it was really funny because when people were here, they were like, who's going to work in here? And we're like, no, we're getting there. But so far, at the time it was me and you, we had Micah, and then we had one other graphic designer working for us. And so it was just a very, very small team. I mean, and it was a good team, but 4 of us in this giant building. It was like looking around like, what in the world? I remember thinking so we've done another renovation since then, and we built a training room. And I remember in the bullpen, I was like, oh, we could just turn that into the training room. But now there's no more desk spaces. Even in the building, we've already renovated twice and expanded and built out, and it's totally full. In the last couple of years, it's kind of been a fun change.
It's grown a lot since then. So it's interesting. Why did you start with 2 creative hires? It's kind of not what most businesses do in their first positions.
I think the creatives, when you think about what does HiViz do really well, we speak firefighter and we speak engineer very well. And then we liaise those two and allow engineers and firefighters to speak. We're almost like the translator in between. And in order to have effective translation between firefighters and engineers, you have to have a medium to do that. And that medium oftentimes is video, or that oftentimes is other printed media or digital media. And so for me, I just found that the fastest way I could communicate with either one of those groups was through video media. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and a video's got to be worth 1,000 pictures. And so it's just one of those really effective ways to communicate. And ultimately, because when you look at the lighting space, I really do think we're really innovative in the things that we do. But lighting is not like, we didn't go from like lighting to rocket ships. We made lighting better and more robust, but it was still lighting at the end of the day. And so all of what we do, I tell people all the time, 10% of the FireTech magic is on the circuit board, and 90% of it is how we treat our customers and train the market. And so that requires video, that requires multimedia, and creatives were the folks that could help us tell the story of how to actually do the job better after dark.
And then we learned early as we started making those first few hires about how important culture was. So I want you to talk about the process of defining culture, and then how we actually like lived that out as we started growing the team.
As when we started, I was kind of the opinion, like, we just need bodies quick. Yeah. And so it was really kind of hard to figure out, do we just need bodies or do we need the right fits? And I remember you and I talking about it a lot. Like, this is the type of people that we want to bring in. And you can't just say, like, I want a young, fun team, because there's all the reasons you can't say that. But we wanted to have high energy, and it had nothing to do with age, and it had nothing to do with experience. It had everything to do with the energy and the impact that people could have. And so we began looking, and now our team is very diverse in age and in gender and in racial makeup and in gender identities. I mean, all these things. It's a really unique, great team across the whole broader organization globally. And we even have international manufacturing partners. And but when you look at what lets our business be unique, it's that speed to market, and it's that expeditiency. And so when we began building that culture, I think that the culture of innovation, the culture of tenacity, the culture of those defining characteristics that are our personality traits were so important. And it wasn't just like in my baby business brain thinking like, oh, we need a young, fun team. That's not what we tried to build. It was really tried to build a super effective team. And now we've been able to bridge all of those things that, you struggle with as a business, trying to figure out how do you hire the things that you want and how do you define those based on performance versus based on anything else that you might be thinking.
And it was very easy for us to assume early on, you and I have similar, we're very different, but we have some shared values and principles and like where we wanted the business to go. And as we first started making those hires, we thought that everybody was like that and just automatically was on the same page as us. And we learned that wasn't the case. So I remember we started doing brews and business planning on Wednesday or Thursday nights.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where we started the process of defining, okay, well, who are we and who do we want HiViz to be? And from there, we built out our core values. We built out what the characteristics of people that we wanted on the team. And from there, we could build interview questions and an interview process that helped us find people or bring people into the pipeline who matched those things.
Yeah, I think that was actually one of the big things that we did early on was those planning sessions. You have to plan the business growth before you can expect the business to grow by itself. And so knowing that, okay, we're going to need to build a sales team. Okay, we're going to need to build an engineering team. What are the character traits? Those are big things that you think about the skill set. I need you to be a good firmware engineer. But then what you really need to be able to also interview for is I need you to be able to be a good communicator because like I said earlier, we're talking about the business and communication is so important. We need you to be able to communicate effectively to both engineers and firefighters and others. And so building that team, we do end up doing some kind of unique in-person interviews, social interviews, trade show, and we bring new prospective hires to shows and put them in the market. And that's a lot of the, hey, you got to be able to be rough and tumble. The fire truck industry and the firefighting industry is not one that's known for being particularly kind or politically correct in their verbiage. I think in their personalities, they're very kind people, but it's a very tough industry. And so, yeah, do you have thick enough skin to be able to hang with the people that we work with? And I think that the intent of everyone we work with is so good that you have to recognize that people are going to be brash because lives matter and seconds count. And they're also going to be very, very detailed. And if you can work inside that environment, then you're likely to be a good fit.
Hiring has really been its own beast within the business, right? When you need people, it's because you're busy and you don't have time to be looking for people, but you have to do it in order to grow the team. So there was a point where we switched a little bit from doing all of our own organic recruiting to using a team of recruiters. And that took us a while to get over that hump of switching from organic to recruiting.
When I finally found there's a recruiting company we use now that is phenomenal. They reach out and say hey, have you heard of this company? These are the types of things they do. Are you interested in making a career shift? Aren't you? Are you happy? Do you know anybody? But we pay them to bring us a big list of folks. And as they're bringing us that list, then we can pick from that list the folks we want to interview. And ultimately, I think that using a recruiter that lets us be in the driver's seat versus them being in the driver's seat, we know the names of the people. We know their stories. We bring them up and interview them. We're both incentivized to win together. And I think it's been really great for the business. But it was a really hard shift to make because how do you just have someone, blanket the industry? You got to give them defined territories and defined tactics and all the things that you want them to find. And once they find them, then you got to weed them through. And then sometimes you may not find the right people.
And I think what kind of made sense in my mind when we were deciding recruiters versus organic was that active versus passive recruitment. So posting a position online, you see who you're going to catch, who's going to come into your application. A lot of times you get folks who aren't already working, which is fine. But we were seeing a difference between kind of the people we were just catching in an open net versus when we started working the recruiters, they were actively reaching out to people who weren't looking for positions and who are already working somewhere and bringing those people in. Generally,
the theory is the best of the best. And if you're the best of the best, you probably have a job because people don't want to lose their winners.
Yeah.
And so when we look at that, we had to create an environment that was somewhere that the best of the best who are already happy in their jobs might want to come work.
Yeah.
And so it's been a unique kind of push and pull. I know we went back and forth. We had a fractional CFO for a while that was helping us to evaluate the facilities. And in every business book, they say, oh, facilities, just lease them. They're just a tool. You don't need to spend your time and money on these things. But when I think about facilities, this is the home that we want to put these people in. And so you have to create an environment where the people that we're recruiting, come check out the facility, hang out with our team, look at the spaces you'll be working, check out the video studio, the engineering lab, the training center. The places that we're building are places that these people will build their careers.
So in your journey through leadership as the team now has grown, tell me about some of the struggles and some of the wins that you've had in leading.
And, I think like anything, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome when you start out in a
in a leadership role. I mean, because 10 years ago, it was like me, you, and the dog. And so I'm not leading anybody. We're just hanging out, building, things in the garage. As the business has grown, then all of a sudden the team goes from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and the team begins to grow. It's like, why am I really qualified to do this job? And I think that as we began building the team and kind of building out the business overall, that was the biggest thing that I used to struggle with. And I think I still do today. Like, why am I actually qualified to make this decision? And sometimes the answer is you just actually have to get out and do it.
So I think recognizing the difference between, you're like the same age as folks, but like you're paying their payroll and also they're looking to you for direction. And that can be an interesting...
I remember my dad used to talk about this thing called gray hair factor. And when you're in, obviously in the biofuel business I ran, it was like there's all these diesel mechanics. They've been around 100 years. And I was like, I didn't know anything. But at this business, there is a little bit of that, like, who's the surfer guy? Why the hell is this guy telling me some story? And there is a little bit of, I remember walking to fire stations all the time and just not getting laughed out, but not getting taken seriously. Mm-hmm. And as we've grown the business and as there's a little bit of that, like, do we need the gray hair factor in order to actually have the ability to communicate with our customers effectively? It's been tough. I mean, a lot of times I manage people that are older than I am. And when you tell someone older than you are, hey, I need you to do this or do that or change what you're doing, or maybe I didn't like that, then it's difficult because you still have to execute. And I think that one of the most important pieces of advice that someone gave me, actually your executive coach, who I love, by the way.
I was about to bring that up.
Yeah, she was just like, at the end of the day, don't envision that it's like you and Kaoma trying to do whatever you're trying to do. It's you were hired to be the CEO of this business and execute the role and the responsibility of that function, and then lead the people as that role would lead them versus how you would personally, being younger, whatever the interpersonal struggle is. And I think that was really good advice that if the CEO of HiViz needs to do this thing because it's in the best interest of the company, then do that. Mm-hmm. And that's really valuable feedback for us to use in anything that we're doing in terms of business management, because it is a struggle being oftentimes the youngest person on the team. And certainly like in industry functions, whether it's at FEMA or at a trade show or at a technical committee meeting, I mean, more often than not, I know my peers anyway, are often 20 plus years my senior. And so that is a difficult kind of like situation that in a leadership role is hard to manage, but it's something that you just have to manage because there's no other option.
Yeah. I think the other thing that happens is like both the business and the people move through stages. And so when we were a certain size business, that suited a certain type of person. But then as the business grows, you sometimes just grow apart. And so I am kind of always trying to encourage the team, like, we need you guys to be investing in your personal and professional growth because the business is growing and that is going to happen. And when that happens, certain things do just have to change. And so you either kind of grow with it or you end up with too big of a gap. Yeah.
I can think of some situations where as our team has grown, that the team is like, man, I used to work right next to you. Like we were literally doing every single task together. And as we've added 20 more people to the team, now I have to spend my time amongst all sorts of different business groups and people and departments. And I think that as a leader, then I sometimes struggle with, well, how do I maintain the integrity of a relationship with someone who I've committed to having a good relationship with, but I also want to grow the business and grow the team. And I need to now manage through layers and not jump those management layers that I've hired and put in place specifically to allow for that to occur and just go right to the, not the end user, but like the people on our team. That's a difficult thing for me.
I think that kind of speaks to like how we've defined the culture and how we see that replicated out amongst the team. So we've hired folks who now have direct reports under them. And how do you scale the culture across all of those layers? And as we start getting sales team members in the field, you're even more distanced. I think about too, the aspect of culture that I focus on is I'm big on relationships. And I think that if we're going to spend as much time at work as we do, then it should be an enjoyable team to spend it with. So I really love doing things that bring the team together. And I remember during Christmas last year, we had a big partner company in for a meeting that we were prepping for kind of a week ahead of time, and then they were there. And all through that time, our team were doing fun Christmas stuff together. And I remember being in a meeting and we're in like quite a serious moment, and I heard like the team cracking up laughing in the kitchen. And it was like such a juxtaposition between this kind of stressful moment we were in this meeting, knowing that the team were good and they were taking care of each other and they were having a good time. And I was like, I have no idea how they organized whatever they're doing out there, but they're having a good time together. And that is so rewarding to see that they kind of took our philosophy of togetherness and did it together and had a good time. And it's so rewarding when you see that stuff happening. It can sometimes take a while to see like the things that you work on come out.
Yeah.
But I think being patient and Yeah.
When I say patience is virtue, it's
Yeah,
one that
it's true,
I may not have kind of
unfortunately.
in my blood, but it is true. I mean, when people do develop, like you can't expect in 30 days someone can read your mind.
Yeah.
It takes a while to understand the way you operate and work in order to be able to be successful.
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion about where things are manufactured, and it's a topic we talk about regularly. So I think that we should talk about it.
Yeah.
And tell me about the Korean manufacturing team and how we decide what we're manufacturing where and how the whole global manufacturing process works.
So, I mean, we have team in North Carolina, in Seattle, and in Korea. And when we look at the global manufacturing business, you know, you want to have experts doing what experts are good at. And so in North Carolina, the team that we've assembled here is specifically good at firmware, embedded systems, new product development, marketing, sales, business admin. That's the group that in this geography is really best at this space. When you look at the global leader in semiconductor manufacturing, that's in Korea. The best of the best, the Samsungs of the world are in Korea. And so when we look at how do we build the best of the best technology, if the best of the best tech isn't made in North Carolina, we're not going to source it in North Carolina. We're going to source it where they make the best of the best. And so we've really leveraged and expanded our business using the mentality of if we have to source optics in Europe and we got to source circuit boards in Korea and we got to source whatever, different components from different parts of the world, find the best and then assemble them and ship them to firefighters where they need to rely on the best. And that's ultimately our whole business model. I think it's funny though, because sometimes, you know, at trade shows, people will be like, oh, where's it made? And what they're asking is like, is there a 6-year-old girl making your lights in a factory in a sweatshop overseas? I'm like, back up. No, that Korean manufacturing is not at all. It's so Western. It's so high tech. It's not like some sweatshop where people are just slaving away. This is like one of the most premier, like hospital grade manufacturing facilities in the world. And we pay our people really well globally. I mean, the people in Korea oftentimes cost the same or more than people in the USA. And they're just the experts in the specific areas that we manufacture. And so I so embrace the global supply chain and the global commodity manufacturing. There are some complexities. I mean, communicating across international barriers, whether it's Korea or it's Europe or it's Australia or it's here or it's even in parts of like in South Africa or in South America, I only speak English. And so
I am going to touch on that. I want to wrap up kind of this one, but then I do have a specific question for you on the communication.
Okay,
But
fine.
the point I wanted to add too is that I think sometimes also folks forget that like business is done outside of the USA. And so we ship all over the world. And so, I mean, the FireTech brand's passion is here, the public safety market in the USA, but we do so much else that's all over the world.
Mining, industrial, automotive, like there's so much that goes on in Australia, those countries I talked about before. I mean, the global mining market is here, but not all here. It's so much more overseas.
Yeah.
So
I think you told them to eat crow or something.
no, they the Korean team was out at the beginning of that problem. I was telling people that rookie mistakes are not mistakes we can afford to make in the fire truck space. And our customers ultimately rely on our tech to save lives. And if we tell them it's the most reliable tech in the world, and then we tell them we've solved it because we tried 3 or 4 things to solve this particular LED out issue, we didn't nail it on the head. So we'd say, yep, it's solved, don't worry about it. And then we'd like have another issue. And I was just under the impression like, hey, rookie mistake, you guys didn't put solder on the pad. What the hell's going on here? And it turns out it was a much more complex issue. But I told them, I'm tired of eating crow. I've told customers we've fixed this once. I've told customers we've fixed this again. So I don't care if you got to have the guy that invented this machine come out. I want to meet with him in person because I got to solve the issue. And so we solved the issue. We ended up finding out it was this profile. We changed it. And we're at dinner one night, and the Korean engineering team is sitting there, and we pulled the menus out, and they said, oh, wow, this is going to be a great experience. I'm like, we must be a great experience. We're just a hamburger place. And they're like, there's no crow on the menu. You don't like to eat crow, and this is the place that doesn't serve it. And I was like, guys, you don't actually eat crow. That's not something we do here. That's an idiom that means I don't want to be wrong. I have to go back on it over and over again. He said, oh, got it. We didn't know. We've been thinking about this all day, and we thought this restaurant was perfect for you. So, well, thank you for the idiomatic humor here, but it was one that didn't translate well. And that's something that we have to do. Ultimately, that's why we end up going over there so often, because we have to be able to do things in person.
I think it's become especially prevalent as we've started developing products that are more than just kind of on and off, as they do all sorts of various functions. And I know that with the development of the BG2 and some of our new warning lights that we just released, communicating how we want those products to operate has been fun. So tell me about some of the unique ways you've approached that development.
Yeah. I struggled really hard with one of the things, flash patterns are a big topic in the lighting space. And one of the things that I struggled with a lot was, how do you tell a team in another country, like, it needs to blink 3 times and then pause. And then like, how do you explain a flash pattern? Because what we don't want to do is just like say, oh, here's a video of our competitor light fixture. Just make it do this.
Yeah.
You want to like, in the BG2, it's this new modular. There isn't even a competitive fixture for it. So we had to explain what is it going to look like. And we couldn't do it with pictures because it's moving. It's like, how does this go? So my I was a cellist for 20 years. I played, and I know you're a flautist. So this music background, which is pretty funny.
We'll play a song for you later.
Oh, that'd be nice. Join a little ditty. But I took a lot of music theory classes. And so I always loved music theory.
I didn't like theory. I just liked playing.
Oh, I loved it. It was the engineering of music, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
So one of the things I know about Korean culture is that they're very rooted in musical experiences. It's taught through all the schools. So one of the things I struggled with was flash patterns and disseminating data in flash patterns. I'd try to write it in code. I'd try to write it in blocks. Could not figure it out. And ultimately, I asked one of our Korean team members, hey, do you know how to read sheet music? And she was like, yeah, of course I do. I said, okay, hold on. So I created a sheet music that was like a percussion sheet music. Each of the 4 circuits on our BG2, I assigned a different note value and different tone to. And then I created, using just some music theory, created the repeats, the bar sizes, the frames, the tempos, and all the accents that I wanted, and wrote out the sheet music and then played the song files back. And when I sent the sheet music and I played the song files and I told them what each beat represented electrically, immediately the switch flipped. And we began to develop this technology that was then communicating across the international border without speaking Korean, by using sheet music. And so all of our flash patterns have a sheet music score attached to them. And that was the best way for us to communicate with the global team on how to manufacture it.
Maybe you should play them for us on your cello sometime.
Yeah.
Play them to the lights going.
That would be hilarious. Maybe one day.
Sam Surfer did.
We take over more than 50% of the market and I will get on the news.
Okay,
and I will play the cello
down.
flash pattern.
Write that down. We get asked a lot about the two of us working together and being married and also being co-founders and working together.
Like working together?
It has its own set of unique challenges. I think it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. So tell me about working with your spouse.
There's not enough words in this podcast. I'm kidding. Honestly, I enjoy it. I think that you and I work together well. People that are too similar can never, it doesn't matter if they're married or not, but like, I think that we were pretty lucky just in general that we align on morals, on work ethic, on passion, like the types of things that generally, like that's obviously, I think, why we're compatible. But in work, we're so different. I mean, we did the disc profiles and I'm 100% DI and 0 SC and you're 100% SC and 0 DI. So, I mean, like we really do kind of fit together in this unique way.
Yeah.
And we have different roles in the business. And so...
Which have only come later, like at the start, we had to do everything. So we've been able to kind of get into our own areas and stay apart. And
and it's like you still have to be able to get together and work. It's hard to like, you can never not be my wife. And so like, even when I'm in a work role and I'm like, nope, this is how I would treat this employee. It's like, okay, yeah, but it's not because you're still my wife.
Oh,
so,
I don't. I just, don't care.
So it's hard. I mean, I think there is a little bit of this like struggle that's how do you separate business and personal? And then how don't you separate them? Because what ends up tending to happen is like we're sitting around the dinner table and we're talking about, hey, this is what happened at work. Oh, this is this employee. Oh, this is this finance. Oh, this is this business thing. And then the Korean team's calling because they got different hours. The Australian team's on the line. It's just like there's all these different people in the mix. And then the two of us being so intimately connected, I think it's good and bad. It's good because we know what each other are doing, and it's bad because we do it all the time. But I would rather do that than, I mean, like I don't like to garden. What the hell else am I going to do?
You should get into that.
Actually, I did get a bonsai tree.
Well, you do. You got a bonsai tree. Yeah. So you do like to garden.
I do like to garden. Dang. Fancy.
I don't remember really actively making the decision about how that was going to impact our life when I did start working with HiViz full time, because it was kind of just like, we have to do this. But did you think about it?
About what? About being married?
About being married, and then like there was a point where I was kind of working part-time for HiViz, and then I left my job, and it was when the business was growing that I came in full-time. But did you seek counsel? What was your thought process about like, shit, we're really going to work together 24 hours a day?
I got to tell you a funny story. So I don't know if you know this, but Tony and I one time, we were in Seattle, and
Tony,
my partner from Vision X.
Yes.
So Tony, I can't remember what we were talking about, but anyway, you might have even been there. I think you might have stopped by or something. Anyway, and he pulls me aside and he's like, I don't know what the hell you need to do, but you need to marry that girl and work with her, put her in your business, because that is going to be the best decision that ever happened for HiViz. I'm like, Tony, like, come on, just pump the brakes for a sec, Chief.
I think I just moved to the US, maybe.
Yeah, he was like, this will be the best decision you ever make. And I just laughed, like, okay, thanks, man. But then honestly, like, it wasn't a business decision to get married, but it was a great decision. I think it worked out good.
Yeah. No, I think that it does work for some and it doesn't for others. But yeah, I think being opposite really helps. I think both leaning into our own unique areas is helpful.
They say if you find a job that you like, and this is like the old cliche, find a job you like, you never work a day in your life. But I mean, if you marry your best friend and then you get to work together every day, like that's literally what you like to do. And not you like to do, I like to do. I mean, I think we both like to do it. I think it works out great. And I would not, if we worked in different, I mean, like if you worked at the vet clinic and I worked at the fire station, we would never see each other.
So what advice do you have for other business owners that maybe already work with their spouse or want to work with team members?
Don't marry somebody crazy.
Family.
Or all the above.
Well, I think that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think marry your best friend. Find a good partner. And then if you want to work together with them, great. But it doesn't work for everybody. If it does work for you, lean into it. And if it doesn't, then...
That's okay.
Yeah, then it's okay. Then don't. I mean, it's like no one's holding a gun to your head.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I mean, really, like you helped. And early on, there was nobody else that was going to do, like, no, you can't ask an employee to come in and work like you work. I mean, it was like, hey, we're trying to make this happen. And yeah, we got to work 30 hours a day. Oh, well, there wasn't enough money for that. And so sometimes it makes good business sense to work together because you can both, for a common goal.
You both invested.
We both win together, we both lose together. And I think it's healthy and it's good. If you can manage it, not everybody can, but I think it works well for us.
Yeah. So the future, what do you think? Can you talk about some of the challenges and wins in the past 10 years and then what next?
Yes. Challenges and wins in the next 10 years. You know, today we do fire apparatus really well, and we do white lights on fire apparatus really well. But I have a personal passion for the ambulance market, and I know every firefighter listening is probably lolling. I know, but I love giving grandmas a hugs at 2:00 in the morning. I was like, it's my favorite thing in the world.
Hugs, yeah.
That's it. But it was like, honestly, like people rely on the EMS space, and a lot of firefighters hate that space. But I used to get so much fulfillment out of working with the people that needed the ambulances, and a lot of times, every medic that's ever been in the back of a truck knows that the majority of the time you're in a customer service mode, not an emergency service mode. And so I want to support that community. And so I love the ambulance space. I want to develop more and more products and begin to grow in the ambulance market space. And we've recently just launched it. We just hired a new lady to run the ambulance division who's awesome.
What's up, Michelle?
Michelle Yoder, the best. And then she's building out her team to be in that segment. And so that's one thing, in the future that if I could say what does it really look like to be doing well in the next 5, 10 years, whatever, I want to do the ambulance market well, just like we do the fire market. And I want to expand. I mean, we do things that are steady burning that help people see, I think, better than anybody else in the space. Now, warning lighting, smart digital alerting, connected technology, all those things, man, that's coming. And I am so excited to be able to bolt those pieces into the business strategically and carefully and with the best fire market, like ethics that we can put behind it, business ethics, that if we do those well, I really think that we can make first responders safer after dark. And that's ultimately what's driving me every day is that mission, first responders at the broader level.
Well, it's been fun. It's been a fun 10-ish years so far. And I'm excited for the next 10. I'm glad we didn't start recording this at 30 years because this took us 3 weeks to shoot. We're in here all day.
Oh, my goodness.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing other business owners' stories as we kick this off. I think it's a unique spot that a lot of our customers are in, and I think those stories will be really fun to share.
Yeah, honestly, I guess that's a good close here. The 2448 podcast is just the beginning, and I am so excited as well just to hear those stories of people that have been in the same space. What do you do in the 48? What happens when you're not on shift, and how have you built businesses to support the lifestyles that you want to live and lead? And if you know anybody that's interested, for any of our listeners that are on the podcast today that might be able to tell their story of being a first responder and starting a business, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to our team. In the show notes below, you'll have all of our contact information.
Thank you so much.
See ya.
See ya.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. If you want to be on the show or you know someone who should, head over to the2448.com and submit your business. Don't forget to follow and subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If you thought it was 4 stars, still give us 5 stars or I will find you. See you next time. Later.